Did I do something different here? I may have. I may have done something different I wasn't aware of. I did not do that on purpose. I actually changed something that I shouldn't have changed, but that's okay. Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Talk Williams, host and creator of what? Hip Hop 50th. And yes, it is Friday night, the last day of May. It's May the 31st, 2025. And I just want to say hello, welcome. And I also want to say that I actually clicked and saved an image of something that I really didn't mean to do. And I think whatever I did, I was trying to see is the live up. Because I got to check my sound and all of that goodness. But let me try to do it here and see what happens on this other device. And if it is live, I welcome y'all to join me on this Friday night. Let me check right here. I'm just checking my sound. Oh, the sound is working and it appears to be live. At least it appears that I am on it. So what I'm going to do is go down here and try to do my best effort to get it over into another space. Let's say if I go here. Yep. And so this evening, I want to talk about a not too popular, not too familiar concept or principle that was kind of new to me in terms of the terminology, but not new in terms of what it is. In fact, I think many of us have, put it this way, many of us have either experienced, did, quiet cutting or quiet quitting. I'll get it right. No problem. I'll get it right. Let me see if I can do something here though. Yeah, I will get it correct. Yeah, let me see. Paste that. Will allow to paste. Oh, it didn't. That's strange. I was trying to copy and paste a link to actually share this live out, but I guess it's like, okay, we're not doing that. Let's see. Let me invite somebody. Join. Okay. Join me on YouTube. Join me on my YouTube channel. Anyway, what's up, guys? Any sports people out there? Did you see the Pacers? Did you see the New York Knicks? Yeah. Any WNBA people out there? Because I am a fan ever since last year with Caitlin Clark. I just got to tell you what the business is. Topic of discussion. Topic of discussion. I always try to seem a little more smarter than I am. The topic to discuss is quiet quitting and quiet cutting. These are two new terms, but very familiar principles. I'll just say that. Yeah. Share and slash or join. Yeah. All right. Hit the return. Yeah. And so let me get into what the quiet quitting is. And I'll just play a clip from, where's this clip from? I think it's this Today Show or something. Good Morning, one of these shows. I'll just play a little clip from that. And they're going to talk about what was trending on TikTok when this term quiet quitting. It's something. It's I'll say that. It's something, right? Let me play the clip. Let me shut up and play the clip. Here we go.
Quiet quitting means that when somebody asks you to do something, you don't do it.
The concept of quiet quitting
Not doing the job of 2 to 3 people, stuff like that.
is making some very loud noise on TikTok.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. I'm going to tell you that.
First, let's define the idea, which one career coach says is really about priorities.
People aren't going above and beyond. They're not bending over backwards for their employers anymore and sacrificing their mental and physical health. They're doing what they're getting paid for.
Allison Peck has amassed hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, doling out professional career advice. She tells us quiet quitting doesn't apply to many people, whether they're trying to run a company or jumpstart a career. But for others, she says it makes a lot of sense, even if the name doesn't.
I wish it was called something different because you're not quitting, you're taking care of yourself.
So what would you call this?
You're coasting. You're like carefully coasting.
Some speak about reclaiming control between work and personal life.
Like, isn't that just called working, like doing your job properly with a healthy boundary?
While others say it's partly about pay.
Quietly quitting for me is acting my wage and knowing that my time is valuable.
The viral trend coming at a time when a Gallup poll finds employee engagement has dipped for the first time in a decade, and the great resignation of workers post-pandemic has put a strain on many businesses. But some online warning that quiet quitting doesn't benefit most people in the long run.
Quiet quitting is literally wasting your time at this company and shooting yourself in the foot. So please don't do that. If you feel like you have no other choice, get a new job.
As for advice to employers about combating quiet quitting,
managers are really important, and that does start at the top. It's important to have the right kind of conversations at the right time so that people do know what's expected of them in their role and how their work connects to something bigger.
Conveying a sense of purpose and a mission to those who are also looking for fresh incentive is important too.
I still work just as hard. I still get just as much accomplished. I just don't stress and internally rip myself to shreds. And it's beautiful.
Okay, Sam. I mean, is this a generational divide? Is this like kids these days? Or is it more widespread?
Or just people wearing shirts with clouds on it. It's very interesting, guys. You would think there might be a generational divide because a lot of the videos are going onto TikTok, younger people that are seeking out this for sort of a more honest, authentic forum. But if you look at the numbers, it really spans across age groups, Gen X, Gen Z, older millennials, and baby boomers all clocked in at the same amount of engagement, according to this poll, 31 to 33%, which is to say that the majority of Americans across all ages either are not engaged or actively disengaged. That might be how you feel, and you can adopt this principle of trying to strike work-life balance, but maybe, just maybe, don't advertise it to your bosses. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, hard to sell that one.
I don't know.
I'm an overachiever, so I think I
just feel like you should be here.
This Labor Day night with new insight into a new term that's been getting a lot of buzz in offices across America. If the phrase quiet quitting sounds like a made-up trend from social media, it's because it is. But whether you call it quiet quitting or slacking off or rethinking how much work should dominate your daily life, the reality is a lot of people in this country are having that conversation these days. So on this Labor Day, our own Vanessa Ariza drills down on the new approach to work life and the balance and what this means for all of us.
Quiet quitting. Have you heard of that term? Well, some people say it's about work-life balance, while others argue it can lead to laziness. On this Labor Day, we headed out to a picnic. People enjoying the fruits or barbecue of their labor and enjoying the day off. They'll be back to the office Tuesday morning, and we wanted to know their thoughts on quiet quitting. Before they could answer, they asked what it was first. Have you heard of quiet quitting?
no.
Have you ever heard of quiet quitting before?
Not really.
Okay, so if you're asking yourself the same thing, what is this quiet quitting you speak of? Well, it's defined as performing your job that's assigned. There's no above and beyond action, extra work on your days off, or answering those emails 24/7. Natasha Bowman says this is nothing new, rather an updated name with a hashtag, with an old adage.
Which is something that has been around forever. I will tell you, I have once or twice in my career been a quiet quitter.
She and her husband started the nonprofit group, the Bowman Foundation for Workplace Equity and Mental Wellness. The goal here is to help companies and employees find a healthy balance that promotes better cultures of mental wellness.
People now, over the past couple of years, have had the opportunity to experience what it's like, oh, hey, family, like I got to meet my kids all over again, you know? So they got to experience what work-life balance meant and felt like.
This is a force Stephanie Agger says she can get on board with.
I don't think it's that they don't want to work. I think, like I just said, they want more time with their family, especially with the pandemic. They saw what's more important to them.
And she's not alone. Darren Svensson wouldn't mind a little break from the overtime himself.
I'm for it. I would like to have a little decent break in between.
But this isn't for everyone. One man who I spoke with who didn't want to go on camera says it comes down to people just not wanting to work. For the most part, Boatman says people do want to work. They simply want to be recognized, appreciated, and prosper.
There's this concept of quiet quitting where people are coming to work and they're just doing the minimum, doing their hours, doing their job, not volunteering or raising their...
Now, this gentleman here is Simon Sinek, okay? Or Sinek. I might be pronouncing his last name wrong. But let me say something to you guys about quiet quitting. Let me tell you how familiar I think most of us are about the term quiet quitting. Now, when I first ran across these articles, I can tell you now, I was curious. I said, what is quiet quitting? What is quiet quitting? Because what I was really doing, which I will play some of those clips in a few minutes, I was actually searching out how AI is affecting artificial intelligence and the advent of it, how it's affecting the workplace. What are the potentials in terms of people working certain technology jobs right now? And what does that mean? What are the ramifications of these AI models coming into our workplace and either eliminating jobs or having people to be potentially retrained or skilled up or upskilled, however you pronounce it, and getting new assignments or however it goes. And then I was also looking at the morale. I was trying to get a sense of what would the energy be like at certain companies for many departments or areas where they know AI is there, and maybe there's really not some level of appreciative or appreciable transparency coming from the C-level or the board or even the CEO. And I don't think anybody expects it from HR. I don't even know if that's a human resource role to let you know that technology is about to hit this company and it's just going to run y'all over, or some of y'all, right? Might get hit by that. And as I was looking at the different research, I'm doing a little research on it, trying to get some stuff that just makes sense to me, that probably make more sense to you guys. I run across these terms, quiet quitting, and I didn't know what it was. So I looked at a couple of videos, and as that clip explained a second ago, quiet quitting is just about not doing the hustle and bustle at your job anymore. It's about doing your job, doing enough to not get fired, but not being overzealous, not taking on extra duties, and as much as possible, and I apologize if I'm howling, guys, and as much as possible, let me calm my ass down, to detether yourself, or at least give the energy that you're not going to be available after you're off the clock, unless it's, specific to your job that you would be available. So I was just looking at that. Here's the other thing, and I'll play the clip in a minute. There's not only a quiet quitting, there's actually a counterpart to quiet quitting. So on the one hand, we have quiet quitting, which is what the employee would do. On the other hand, they have a counterpart called quiet cutting, which is what your direct report, management, supervisor, your job, your employer, what they would do. Okay, so let me be quiet and finish playing this clip here from Simon Sinek. I don't even know how to pronounce the name. But before I do, let me recognize Colin Mahad. I don't know how to pronounce your name, Colin, so I'm going to just say Colin. I apologize for this. Colin says, I'm retiring in 4 years at 60 years old. I'm from the Caribbean. Shout out to Colin. Shout out to Colin from the Caribbean. I'm jealous already. I'm upset with you already. Jeffrey Ball, I'm going to pin yours, Jeffrey Ball, because I think you're leaning in on some substance or some idea of actually what's happening like right now with this. So Jeffrey Ball says, let me see if I can open up your chat. Jeffrey Ball said, your comment. Jeffrey Ball says, my job has told me we will temporarily be shorthanded for 6 years now. Eventually, you just have to say no to overtime. It's nice for a while, but burns you out quickly. Got it. Understood. Colin comes back and says, I'm actually taking on extra duties, writing some automation software. Consultants wasn't able to do it. Oh, man, that's dope, Colin. So, Colin, just real quick, like, if you could just give us some of the apps you might be using, or maybe the IDEs, or maybe the language you write it in, like just give us a 2 or 3, as many as you want, really, because I'm interested myself. But just give me a little quick, give us a little more feed, if you don't mind, on what it is you write it in and its purpose, and what IDEs you might be using, if I'm even saying that correct, or whatever. I'm just want to get a sense of it. But yeah, quiet quitting. That is crazy. Now, again, let me just say this. My first experience with quiet quitting was in a relationship. That's the craziness, because when I look at that concept, quiet quitting, not doing as much as you can, not doing extra, I think I was a quiet quitter, and I've been quiet quitted on. When I was in previous relationships, committed relationships, when those relationships was dying out, when they was burning out, I think that I had cut back on the additional things. I did enough to be the man, to be the provider. I did enough to keep food on the table and keep a smile going to and fro. But I stopped. I pulled back. I would not do anything extra. And that meant when she wanted to go shopping beyond food or what was necessary, I pulled back on that. I just didn't participate. I just didn't offer to go. I just, different things like that. I remember I used to, man, I'll be honest with you, because I pride myself on doing whatever I can at whatever level I can when I'm in a relationship, a committed relationship with my woman. And I used to let my bank account go negative sometime, even though I might be getting paid or might be collecting a check in 2 or 3 days, so that hers wouldn't. But once I started, now that I know what I was doing, quiet quitting the relationship, my bank account never went negative again. But let me jump back to the beginning of this talk right here. I appreciate you guys' comment, though, with Simon Sinek.
There's this concept of quiet quitting where people are coming to work and they're just doing the minimum, doing their hours, doing their job, not volunteering or raising their hands or going, and that's it. And it raises the question, is that bad? And I'm a great believer that it's all about expectation management. Like I get asked about Amazon a lot. Like, do I disagree with how Amazon is run? And my answer is always the same, which is they never lied. They didn't tell you it's a magical place to work where it's all kumbaya and we all we all hang out with unicorns every day. It's really amazing. They're very open about it, that it's very, very aggressive and very rough and very competitive. And even the people who love it only last 2 years because they burn out. And so because they don't lie, you know what you're going to get if you go work there. And if you like that kind of culture, then go work there. If you don't like that kind of culture, then don't work there. But don't take the job and then say, I didn't know, because you did. Like Apple, people say, well, Steve Jobs used to drive his people really hard. But you ask the people who loved working there, they will tell you, yes, it was hard and there was a lot of pressure, but I did the best work of my life. And I'm glad I worked there because I never would have been able to work to that standard if I didn't work at Apple back in the day, right? So the important thing is that companies are honest about the kinds of cultures that they have, right? It's the lying. It's the, look how everything's kumbaya. And look, no culture is perfect. Even good ones have problems, and even bad ones have advantages, right? But I think it's about managing expectations. And I think it's okay for somebody to say of themselves, look, I am not a careerist. I am okay with the fact that I will never be an owner or a senior manager. I want to be paid fairly. I want to do decent work. But I want work to fit neatly in my life and not overwhelm it. And I'm going to look for a job where that is possible. And I don't think we're at the point where we have total honesty on both sides yet. I hope we can get to the point, because there's still stigma, because the older generations like you and me are looking at, if somebody were to say to us, I only want to work 40 hours, I'm willing to push my boundaries occasionally, but really this is just we would be like, well, you're not working here. So, you know? So it hasn't normalized yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a question of being honest with oneself. And you're allowed to change your mind as well. Like, I've decided I do want to be a little harder driving, and I do have more ambition than I thought, you know? Or less. But I think it's just about honesty. And this point of view is as true in personal relationships as it is in our professional relationships. So I had a conversation with somebody recently that I found absolutely fascinating. And she is polyamorous. She has 4 boyfriends, right? And she is very open about it. And one of the things that she explains is you have to be very honest with everybody so that everybody knows what the deal is. You know, I think what a lot of people do is they're dating somebody, it's new, it's casual, and they're dating somebody else that's new and casual, but they don't tell them about each other. So they both think that they're more special than they are, or they both are driving towards something that may or may not be true because, you know, you're dating 2 or 3 people and you're going to wait and see which one works out. In the poly world, what I'm learning is you tell everybody everything so everybody knows. And it's very open and honest. And everybody knows where they stand. You can say, I'm not into this. I want to be the sole, or I'm okay with this. And maybe something will develop, maybe it won't. But the point is it's on the table. And I admire the level of communication. What I'm hoping is that we do the same thing in our professional lives. So you sort of have poly work, if you will. You know, I have 2 full-time jobs. You know, I have 3 things going, or I only want this kind of relationship. And it works if both parties are really open and honest, because it's all about managing expectations. Hold on, I thought that you were going to give me all of your attention and all of your effort and all of your ambition, and you're telling me you only want to you want to treat my job as a casual job? Like, just replace relationship with job. All the same rules seem to apply. But if I knew that, I would be fine with that. I would have given you a different job and had different expectations and wouldn't have pushed you really hard. I would have given that work to someone else. Because I'm assuming you want to live your career like I live my career. Like I assume that I'm getting into this relationship and you're getting into it for the same reasons as me because we never had a conversation. We are nowhere near that in terms of social acceptance for that kind of conversation. But I aspire for that somebody sits down and says, a part of your CV and part of your interview says, you know, what kind of work-life balance do you aspire for and how do you view work? Even if you change your mind. And then if expectations are managed, then what's the problem?
You've answered one of the actual number one question.
So yeah, just real quick, guys, I appreciate the comments. Colin, yeah, I get it. My ID is C++ builder. Yeah, that's cool. That's dope. Yeah, that was the thing that caught my attention. When I was like listening to the business people talk about quiet quitting, and I wasn't familiar with it in corporate America or working a job or dealing with clients or in anything. I just wasn't familiar with the term. So I kind of, perused like some history of where that came from. And it says that the term quiet quitting gained prominence, in 2022, especially with the rise or the viral content on TikTok. But it originally dates back to 2009. And they say back in 2009, they had an economist or some of these guys, these financial people. One that they mentioned is Mark Bolger. And they say he is accredited for coming up with the term. However, and this is where all of us know just from living, the concept of quiet quitting is not, I don't think is new to any of us, because we've all experienced through life in whatever domain or professional space that is, where we make a conscious decision, maybe not to quit and walk away, but to definitely pull back. You're not getting 160% no more. Like me, I can directly relate it to personal relationships. I was with a woman who would clean and cook and work every day. And she would clean and cook and work every day. And I remember, now that this concept is here, she quiet quit it. She just quiet quit it. And we're going to get to the counterpart in a second. There's a counterpart to quiet quitting. Quiet quitting, for the most part, is the individual. If you think about it in the workspace, it's the employee. Well, there's a counterpart. I'm going to play that clip in a second called quiet cutting. This is what the employer does. And even more now, especially with AI showing up. But let me play this response from this gentleman on his clip.
I wanted to ask you about today, because when I read your book, The Infinite Game, one of the big things it changed in my life was, I remember I was on a plane, I read the book, started writing some stuff, came back to our office in the UK, and I did a big presentation to all my teams about how we create a sustainable company. Because if what if what you're talking about in the book is true, then and we're not playing a finite game here. How do we redesign the business from the ground up so that it is fundamentally sustainable?
Yep.
I came up with this thing called WWW, Work, Welfare, and World, which is the 3 reasons why we exist. We made 2020 goals, so this was in 2019, 20 goals before 2020 for each of these areas. And I'm thinking about it again a lot now, which is like, if I was to design my business in a way where my team members would stay working here forever, how would I go about that? You've just answered it by saying the point about honesty.
Yeah.
Expectations. So sitting them down and saying, what do you want from your life? Because I've never asked that.
Yeah.
As you quite rightly identified, I'm presuming they want what I want.
Exactly.
So honestly, I wrote it here as a question to ask you. How do I get my employees to stay forever?
Okay, so why
Not
should
like a dictator. That sounds awful.
But I understand
Yeah.
that. But why should, it's, you want to create a place in which if people want to stay, it'll be an enjoyable place that they can make a career and grow within the organization, right? Like, and for some people who don't have aspirations for leadership, that they can come and do good work every day and sort of get fair raises on a regular basis, so that they would, with cost of living adjustments, et cetera, that they want to stay there, even if it's a middle level. Like, not everybody aspires to like be a hard driving, owner, And I think it's about making it a conversation. We never treated work like a conversation, We treated it like a speech. This is how it's going to be. And I think, so one of the good things that's coming out of, COVID and young people is they're asking questions about, why does work have to be that way? And employers are rebelling against it because it doesn't fit the way we grew up and doesn't fit our understanding of relationships, And it's just a conversation. That's all it is. And by being honest up front, then you can say, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for us. I don't think you'll enjoy working here. And so if I employ you, knowing what I know now, we will both get frustrated. And I will either ask you to leave, or you will just tell me you're going to leave. That's how this will end, because of misaligned expectations. And so I think being honest about what you want and who you are and what your ambitions are, even if they change in the middle, you can knock on the door and say, I've changed my mind. I think I want to stay here forever. I told you I didn't, but I really love it here. And I know this from the military. Some people join the military because it's a steady job in a bad economy, or because the military will pay for you to get a college education, and they didn't have the money to get it without it. So they join the military. And then when there, they fall in love with it. They never came in for service. They discovered the service and the brotherhood and the sisterhood and decided to stay, And some people might have come in for the service and realized this isn't for me. So work should be the same. But I think there needs to be honest conversation about, and like I said, I've had debates even with my partners, my work partners, when they say, well, if we're paying them a full salary and giving them benefits, they shouldn't have another job. And my question is, why not? As long as our work product doesn't suffer as a result. Like, if they're phoning it in, missing all the meetings, then yes, absolutely, right? Like, we're paying for certain expectation of performance, but not necessarily of when they get it done. And so...
Now, I'll jump in here and I'll throw a term that many of us are familiar with, reciprocity, right? Reciprocity, meaning, I remember when I was in let me just say this. In the third grade, around in the third or fourth grade, because I didn't go to a private school, so I wouldn't have got it in the second grade. But I'm thinking around the third grade, they was teaching us some basic, I was getting some exposure to fractions, right? And they was like, well, if you have 5 over 1, right? So the 5 and then the fraction bar and the 1 underneath, that equals 5. And they say, well, if we reverse it and put the 1 over the 5, what do you got then? I'm like, okay, well, 1/5. That's all my IQ can tell me. And they was like, yeah. So after a few drills of that, they introduced this term in the classroom. They said this is the reciprocal. This is the reciprocal. And at the time, because, you know, I've never heard the term before, I'm thinking that this term reciprocal is just a mathematical term, and I'm afraid to forget it, because if I forget it, I won't understand math, or at least the fractional part of flipping it. And then they said, no, this is the inverse. And then I'm like, okay, I got the inverse, I got the reciprocal. You know, I'm trying to get my rote machine on, ROTE, which is the most, well, I don't want to insult anyone, but it is a very antiquated, primitive, barbaric way of learning. There's just so many other ways that we've come to appreciate now. But anyway, having said that, I think when it comes to quiet quitting, like I said, quiet quitting, my research told me real quick using the AI tool, the term was coined by some economists back in 2009, but it started really being used around 2022. So if you think about the pandemic, people leaving jobs, different things like that, or just pulling back from giving their all. All right. And so the quiet quitting is a new term to me, but I'm familiar with the concept and principle because I remember being in relationships. I remember my girl, my woman, the person I was committed to. I remember quiet quitting. And I have to be honest, a lot of times I'm thinking in that personal relationship or at your work, at your job, with your customers, with your staff, your employers. A lot of times it's not about people want more and they want to be paid more. A lot of times people are looking for reciprocity. That's what I think people look for sometimes. Sometimes they look to see, look, I'm giving 100%. I'm doing stuff at home off the clock. I'm having conversations with people like my family and friends, like at a Starbucks or at my house, or maybe I'm out and we just, work stuff might come up and I might be bouncing ideas off of them as just to brainstorm for a second. I mean, we're not going to shut the club down with it, but just to brainstorm for a second about something I might be working on and an exciting challenge, not one that's got you stuck and you're miserable and you just begrudge it or whatever, right? No. And then, I'm getting feedback and I'm using that and I'm coming in and I'm trying to do whatever it is I can do. I think what happens sometimes, and I'm just talking about personal relationships, if there's no reciprocity, your spouse, your other half, your whoever might start quiet quitting. Now the food is served from the microwave instead of from the oven. The floor is wiped instead of scrubbed. I'm just saying that. Anyway, I want to get over to quiet cutting's counterpart. Yeah, everything has an antithesis. It's a yin and yang to everything. Quiet cutting's counterpart is something that they call quiet quitting. Counterpart is something that they call quiet cutting. Let's listen to what quiet cutting does.
Your consumer alert, the practice of quiet quitting, where workers give minimal effort, has a new counterpart where employers quietly push workers out.
We have talked about quiet quitting for the past couple years, but have you heard of quiet cutting? It's a new trend being referred to as quiet cutting, and experts say some of the biggest companies in the country are guilty of it.
Hey, what's up, YouTube? Josh here, and man, do I have a topic for you today. I don't know if you've heard about this brand new concept that companies are trying out, but it's called quiet cutting, not quiet quitting, and that's in response to the former. It's like gaslighting, but the corporate edition.
Signs of quiet cutting includes lower job pay in new assignments, requiring relocation when it's impossible, or assignment to an area known where jobs will be cut.
Companies are finding alternative ways to cut costs, and that means reassigning employees instead of getting rid of their job.
Companies are increasingly reassigning employees to other positions, hoping they end up quitting rather than firing them.
What makes quiet cutting different from just cutting or trimming staff?
That is going to mask what we would normally see where companies are rolling out information about layoffs.
Mass layoffs suck, right? But at least you know what's happening. With quiet cutting, they keep you guessing. So here's how it works. Companies basically reduce the resources you have access to, or they give you impossible tasks and time frames. And your managers will be like,
oh, you can't meet your deadlines? Maybe this job isn't for you.
Goal is to make your job so unbearable that you quit.
Nearly 200,000 United States employees have lost their jobs so far this year. That's according to the Forbes layoff tracker. But some companies are stopping short of firing employees and instead reorganizing workforces, reassigning employees in an effort to get them to quit themselves.
This is also known as being forced out or being pushed out. I'm sure some of the viewers know exactly what I'm talking about. But here's the kicker and the real reason that companies do this. They can get you to quit the company. They don't have to pay you unemployment or severance packages. They save money by basically making you miserable enough to leave. Now, before we jump back into the world of quiet cutting, let's talk about today's video sponsor, Brilliant.org. You guys know I've been living the RV dream, and at night there are no lights. The only thing you can see are the stars, and they're crystal clear. And that's what Brilliant is all about, making learning. Here's the deal. I've been digging deeper into a partner course on Brilliant.org. You might know them. They have a few. For me, I find space interesting, and they're always adding, and as little as 50 space stuff that I 20% off their annual this video. Let me give you some more concrete examples of how they try to do this quiet cutting. They can cut your access to the software that you need. They can limit your hours. They can make you come into the office even if you've been a full-time remote worker. Things that they know you won't like, so they don't have to pay unemployment tax. They're basically playing 4D chess with your sanity, except it's all legal. Now, companies, they love to give you a completely different answer as to why they're quietly cutting. They'll say, well, the economy's bad. Inflation's hitting us hard right now. But the real reason is they want to do anything they can to get you to quit. If someone quits on their own, the risk for a lawsuit just isn't as high, but if they fire you, well, then you're gonna come looking with all of your evidence to take them to court. And companies know this, so they just make your life miserable until you quit. They'll say that this is...
I tell you what, I'm gonna finish playing that, but I'll say this. In a personal relationship, I was with someone and they started eating a lot. They started like just gaining weight. Like they did it on purpose. And the reason why I know they did it on purpose, because after we was not together anymore, and I ran into her and she was with a new guy, a new man, she looked just like she did right before we broke up. Because she ate to make herself less attractive and less appealing to me as part of her quiet quitting, maybe. Or quiet cutting. That wasn't quiet quitting. That was her quiet cutting me. Meaning she was the employer in our relationship, meaning she's the woman. So she was going to decide, you know what? I know you enjoy my body. I know you physically, enjoy me, because now I'm a quiet cut you. She started a quiet cutting and just made herself not as appealing anymore. She started just doing stuff, and I was just like, damn, at the time you thinking, yeah, this is not bad. I'm gone too. I'm whatever. But she was quiet cutting me. So I'm just saying that because it's true and humorous. They just do that in the work environment. Like, these are just subtle things that you'll see if you're in a work environment. All of a sudden, like he says, they reassign you, or they give you tasks and they don't develop you with the resources and the proper amount of training that it would take for you maybe to complete the task, especially when that primary duty or function wasn't how you got hired. It wasn't part of the interview. It wasn't a skill set that was required for you to get the job. It was just as duties added, or you're willing to do anything. And you're just in that department trying to make it happen. And then they'll make it time sensitive. So really, I read this book. It's called they're just elevating you to what they call your Peter principle. And that's not good either. But let me finish playing with this guy saying this is some true stuff here.
A response to employees quiet quitting, or doing the bare minimum, as they say in these news clips even, which just isn't correct.
Quiet quitting, where workers give minimal effort.
People doing their jobs to the point where everyone is happy and then going home and just not doing extra unless they get something for it, like any contractor, freelancer, or your CEO would ask, So then they bring on this executive news coach, and she basically helps companies work through these HR issues. And
Let's bring in Roberta Matchison, an executive coach and advisor to businesses including General Motors and also Microsoft. She helps companies work through human resources issues just like this one.
I just have to pause and say, these are not HR issues. These are legal gray areas that companies are trying to capitalize on.
Roberta, thanks so much for being with us this morning. What exactly is quiet cutting? How prevalent is it? And what's the thought process by companies who use it? Break it down for us.
Well, if your boss sits down with you and says, you know, if I were you, wink, wink, I would take this assignment. That means that, you know, hey, I went to bat for you. And if you don't take this assignment, there's a good chance that you're not going to be here.
You'll note here she talks.
So yeah, I've seen that, right? I've experienced that and I've seen that. Garland Moore, I pinned your comment. You say that my job tried that with me and their plan backfired. Like without naming the company, without naming any people, just conceptually or principally, could you explain how that backfired, if you don't mind? Just something that we can just pull from at the macro level.
Talks about how your manager might sit down with you and give you the wink, wink, you should take this position. I feel like that's a really privileged position to be in. Most employees don't get that sort of warning. They don't get that sort of notice. If you're an executive or a vice president or maybe a manager, if you're watching this and you're thinking, have I been quietly cut? My boss just did that to me. Well, then let me give you some more examples of how companies do this. The most popular method is just to make your job not what you signed up to do. This is known in the corporate world as
task reallocation.
This is just a job you didn't sign up for. You don't know how to do it. You're probably not going to do a good job, and you're probably just going to quit and be really confused as to why they did that. Well, it was to save money. If your commission or bonus has been eliminated, that's another way they like to mess with you. Or maybe you've seen some of these companies start offering early retirement packages for their older workers.
Come on, we can get cheaper people. They're the senior level. They're costing us a lot. Who knows what they're doing?
That's how these companies think. If you look around and your coworkers are no longer employees of the same company as you, well, it might be because they've hired contractors, and that can be cheaper, quicker to get rid of when they're done with what you need. And last but not least, of course, and something very popular on my channel.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I think that, you know, we as people, or you as a person, we as, you know, collectively or what have you, you don't want to get into a position or a situation where you're upset because you know something's not right, and you go stomping off like a mad kid at the playground, you know, because that might not be the wise thing to do. As frustrating as it is, as disappointed as it might be, especially coming from your employer or your direct report, if you start realizing that all of a sudden you seem like you're under pressure, you're under a situation where, yeah, these are great things for the environment. These are wonderful things, tasks and duties, and these are pieces of the puzzle to maybe make the company better than what it was or is, and it takes it to the next step. This is our company being the best it can be 2.0 or 3.0. So this is a wonderful thing. But for you, when you're given the assignment, you cannot be given the assignment that includes a skill set and in most cases requires a certain amount of years of experience to do for something that you've never been in front of before. It doesn't work that way. A lot of these things, it's not read the direction. It just doesn't work that way. But if it hits you like that, then you start feeling frustrated, you're upset, and then you know, you kind of play yourself if you just stomp off, if you get upset, turn your back, hold your head down and walk off the playground. No, you want to collect yourself. You want to realize what's going on and still be pissed off and still be upset, but you want to take the necessary steps and get informed outside of that environment so that, you know, you won't be thinking that it's nothing you can do, that you're helpless, no, because it's not that way. A lot of companies that do that type of practice that gentleman was talking about under the quiet cutting, where you're getting this legal way, formal way, corporate way, nice, pretty strategy on paper of basically flushing you out. A lot of companies, they're in a vacuum. They don't really realize that outside of that company, if you start talking to people and checking with different agencies, potentially a lawyer or whatever like that, they don't realize that they're in violation. Because what happens with a lot of these corporate companies, they think they're in the island. They're in a vacuum where they can just make up the rules as long as the board sign off and they all got the same suits on and they giving each other the nod. They think that that's cool. That's it. But when that happens to you and you get pushed out or extracted out that way or spit out that way, there are some things that you can do. You just don't want to put yourself in a bad way in responding to it, even though it takes a lot, right? And one of the worst things to do is not realize or not know how to respond, but sense and feel that something's not right. But back to the quiet quitting, the employee. This is very informative. Oh, before they start talking, let me just say, Carmel Dream says, I didn't get upset. I thought it was unfair since the company brought in multiple people to take over my position. I quit a few months later. Got you. I understand. So that was the way that Carmel Dreams decided to respond to that. You know, it's tough, and you have to individualize it, right? You have to deal with it as an individual. Where are you economically? Where are you with your family? Did you just purchase a house and you got mortgage? It's like so many dynamics, so many things to consider, but you just don't want to play yourself. So I think that was pretty cool that Carmel Dreams realized what was happening and didn't jump off the ledge, right? Actually come up with a plan and move forward as such. That's dope.
This is one example of quiet quitting, a trend that has been dominating social.
So again, the quiet quitting is what the employee does. Or like I said, what some previous women in committed relationships I was involved with over the years, they quiet quitted the relationship. They just pulled back. They wouldn't put that extra season on that lamb. They wouldn't use that big spoon and scoop it up and taste the juice. They went from that to just saying, it's done. How many slices you want me to cut you? And they used to know how many slices, but that's quiet quitting. But anyway, this is in the work environment.
Media, and especially TikTok. In July, Zaid Khan, a 24-year-old engineer from New York, posted a video about quiet quitting, and it went viral. Since then, the trend has spread like wildfire, with hashtags like quiet quitting, quitting, and quieting.
Does anybody want to work anymore?
Then the mainstream media began covering it.
Like working overtime? No thanks. Late night emails? Ignore those.
Quiet quitting is a really bad idea. If you're a quiet quitter, you're not working for me.
The world is changing and the way of work is changing. Even people saying, I'm not going back to the office. And if I do, I'm definitely quiet quitting until I find a job that is a lot more flexible.
COVID was the ultimate reset. COVID was that moment where people started to ask a bigger question. What do I want for my life? Do I want to continue working the way that I have? Or do I want something different? Do I want to continue to work, which is awesome, but do I also want to be able to enjoy my family? Do I also want to be able to enjoy my life? So I think all of these things are coming in stages, and I think quiet quitting is just the trend that's come as a result of the ultimate reset, which is COVID.
Something like 40% of workers are now saying they plan to change jobs this year.
The pandemic also triggered the Great Resignation.
Trying to retain people, but they're really running scared.
Millions of Americans quit their jobs in 2021, some for better opportunities, some for a career break. The pace of quitting continued well into 2022. This chart tracks job openings and labor turnover in the U.S. economy, JOLTS for short.
We do think that quiet quitting is part of the Great Resignation story. So it fits into the general story of having a high level of quits over the past year and a half, and certainly a very tight labor market. And in that type of a labor market, it makes a lot of sense that workers may not be willing to work as hard as they have in the past because it's very easy to get alternative employment.
So the question is, what is quiet quitting?
Quiet quitting is referring to a situation where employees are making a choice to not necessarily go above and beyond what they're being asked to do. It doesn't mean that they're not doing their job, they're just not going above and beyond.
Back in my day, it was called coasting. For me, my last time quiet quitting was 5 years ago. I used to be in tech sales. What I did was work less. I wasn't putting in the 40 hours anymore. I wasn't giving in to the drama anymore. I wasn't giving into work gossip anymore. I wasn't answering emails or texts or Slack messages, DMs after the work day, so weekends were free. They were mine.
Even though it's millennials and Gen Zers who are actively talking about it on social media, quiet quitting has been happening amongst Gen Xers, which I'm part of the Gen Xers, for the better part of 2 to 3 years.
The anti-work movement is not a new trend. In 2021, the lying flat or Tangping movement took off in China. Many viewed it as an anti-work phenomenon. This is a labor protest movement in China against the country's relentless work culture. Some argue that quiet quitting is similar to the lying flat movement. In the US, quiet quitting could also be a backlash to hustle culture, the 24/7 startup grind popularized by figures like Gary Vee and others.
I think it is almost direct resistance and disruption of hustle culture, honestly. And I think it's exciting that more people are doing it.
When it comes to hustle culture and quiet quitting, we're seeing from Gen Zers especially that they're really focused on ensuring that they have that work-life balance and really mission-driven purpose when it comes to work. And we see this across millennials as well.
People are being more honest about the fact that they just don't want to give beyond the 40 hours of work that they normally would give because they're tired.
There has been a tsunami of job resignations.
In 2021, the Great Resignation dominated the economic news cycle.
Or need to remain in their roles. So,
in the second quarter of the same year, U.S. productivity data posted its biggest ever annual drop. And some economists blame workers leaving jobs or not trying hard at their current jobs for the hit to productivity.
Quiet quitting is probably part of the reason for the slowing in labor productivity. It's hard to tell from aggregate data exactly why labor productivity has slowed so much over the course of the pandemic, but it is certainly one of the reasons that you would expect to be weighing on labor productivity right now.
Employee engagement also appears to be declining. A recent poll from Gallup showed employee engagement in the U.S. dropping for the first annual decline in a decade, dipping from 36% engaged employees in 2020 to 34% in 2021.
Disengagement, not being engaged, that's affecting the productivity. Mentally, they're just not there, and they really aren't giving it their all anymore. And they are just trying to stay under the radar, and they are disengaged. That's very much going to impact productivities.
I do think quiet quitting is a part of the Great Resignation. People are so burnt out. We've just gone through and are still going through a pandemic. We are recognizing that life can be so fleeting and so short, and we want to spend it doing something we love. And that doesn't mean work has to be our dream job. I think that myth of the dream job is slowly or rapidly dying.
People that shut down their laptop at 5 want that balance in life, want to go to the soccer game, 9 to 5 only. They don't work for me, I can tell you that.
Labor demand remains red hot in 2022. That's despite the looming risk of a recession. An economic downturn could make quiet quitting a short-lived trend.
Well, if the labor market were to turn, you'd imagine that quiet quitting would become less of a phenomenon. Well, the risk if you're a quiet quitter is that the economy would slow and you could find yourself in a situation where you're in a job where you haven't been given the most effort that you can, and it puts you at a disadvantage in terms of moving forward at that job. If others have been giving more effort, they're more likely to have greater job security than otherwise. So certainly as the labor market slows, and if we were to go into a recession, could potentially put those workers at a disadvantage.
In addition to talking to thousands of employees per year, I talk to thousands of leaders per year, all the way from your supervisor all the way up to your C-suite CEOs. And I will tell you that they are bothered by this trend because it speaks one of two things. One, we have employees who are doing their job, but they're not going above and beyond. Two, What have we done as an organization to these employees to make them feel like they can't give their best effort?
Does anybody want to work anymore? This week, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon was criticized for agreeing there was some truth to China's accusation that the United States is, quote, incompetent and lazy. Well, there's been a spate of stories about a shift in the post-COVID workplace that suggest he might be right. I keep hearing anecdotally stories of small businesses having trouble hiring people who will show up for a second week of work. In other words, they'll be there day one, but the following week, maybe not. And companies that are trying to compel people to get back to the office are getting a lot of resistance. After Apple employees were asked to be back to a minimum of 3 in-person days, Fortune magazine reports 76% of Apple's employees were unhappy about it, with 56% saying they were, quote, looking to quit. And then there's that recent book, Streets of Gold, by 2 economic historians, one from Stanford, one from Princeton, whose data showed that the children of immigrants coming to America have a better income trajectory than those of people whose parents were born in the United States. In other words, the children of immigrants seem to possess a certain grit that those born here lack. And then there's a rising get paid to don't work movement, getting millions of hits on TikTok and Instagram, calling itself quiet quitting. The idea being, keep the job but don't work very hard at it and focus on getting fulfillment outside of work. A story about quiet quitting has been the #1 most read story all week long at the Wall Street Journal's website. The Journal also recently reported that some are exploiting remote work to hold multiple jobs, getting paid to be mediocre at 2 jobs instead of being good at 1. Axios has labeled all of this the new anti-work movement, a rebellion against rise and grind. A recent Gallup survey found that employee engagement in the United States is falling across all generations, but especially among younger Americans. Among those born after 1989, 54% call themselves not engaged, meaning they'll show up to do the minimum required, but not much else. Joining me now is Paige West, a digital creator who graduated from college in 2020, has been offering advice on quiet quitting on YouTube. Paige, thanks so much for being here.
So again, and I'm going to let that play in a second, but again, what you have here is the quiet quitting from the employees, okay? Like I say, I experienced quiet quitting. Probably a lot of people experience quiet quitting in their personal relationships where it just didn't end, but people did pull back. They just did not give their all anymore. It was just gone. It was like somebody just sucked the air out the room in terms of what I was willing to do. I can, like I say, I can honestly remember being in a relationship where if my significant other had an issue, I would try to come up with 3 or 4 ways to tackle that and try to solve that or whatever. When I quiet quitted that relationship, when I made a determination that I'm not going above, I'm not doing it, when she would express certain things, I would just listen. Because at a bare minimum, since I'm in a relationship with you, at least I should be able to listen. But when there was no reciprocity, when there was no acknowledgement or there was no giving, there was no, I see you and I want you to see me too going on, I was like, man, I can get mediocrity somewhere else. I can get me a cute woman who can cook all right. I can, it's whatever. But the point being, in the workplace, quiet quitting, you're not going to quit the job. You're going to do just enough so that they don't fire you, but you're not going to give them anything extra. You're not going to come up with new and inventive or creative ideas about another way of tackling a particular issue or challenge for your group, for your program, for your department, for the company. But you will participate at the level of assignment and you will contribute at the level that of your primary task that you was hired for under your title. You will do that. But anything else, nah, it won't be any mobile boost whatsoever. But then there's quiet cutting again, where the employer says, we really need you, you're so valuable. But then they get to this part. Check this out.
Hey, so I have good and bad news. Which do you want to hear first?
What's the bad news?
Your current role has been eliminated.
Okay, what's the good news?
You're being reassigned.
This is an example of quiet cutting, a new workplace trend that's been dominating the headlines.
We've talked about quiet quitting. Now there's a new trend, quiet cutting.
A new trend is here, quiet cutting.
Some bosses have been trying out a new technique called quiet cutting.
Quiet cutting is restructuring and reassigning the roles and responsibilities for a completely different thing by not giving them layoff and portraying like, we have something for you, we'll take care of you. Here is the job, take it or leave it. And that basically is avoiding layoff in certain scenario by the employer to employee.
For the past few years, we have seen quiet quitting. We've seen the Great Resignation. And all of this was a sign of a strong economy, a strong labor market, tight labor market. Employees have had the upper hand. Quiet cutting is a suggestion that the tables are starting to turn, that employers are starting to have that upper hand now.
Quiet cutting is just a buzzword term, but reorgs, when a company reorganizes their internal system and teams, is not new. It's not a new concept. And reorgs have historically either been made to benefit the company, but have historically always frustrated employees. It is being highlighted as a different aspect of the mass layoffs and changes in the field of work that we're seeing.
This is Matt Conrad. He's been reassigned twice at IBM. He ended up with a job he loves, but the reassignment process took a toll.
Yeah, so I was actually reassigned, I think, twice in 366 days. And unfortunately, I live with mental health disabilities and major depression, complex PTSD, and anxiety disorder. And all three kind of kicked in simultaneously. And I started having panic attacks on really a twice-a-day basis. And ended up taking short-term disability to make sure I protected my mental health.
IBM isn't alone in having employees reassigned to new roles. Big-name companies like Adidas, Adobe, and Salesforce have been enforcing large-scale reassignments. Also, LinkedIn research published in May found that hiring has continued to slow in many countries, but internal mobility is trending upwards in several industries. Some economists say that despite the overall U.S. job market remaining strong, companies are fearful of what lies ahead, so they're resorting to the quiet cutting tactic.
You know, quiet cutting is happening because companies are fearful of what's coming down the pipe. They're fearful that the economy will go into recession or that they will run into economic headwinds, and they are concerned that they're going to have to cut down the line. And so this is a little bit of insurance for them. The other thing it does is it potentially saves employers money, because if you have to do a major layoff, then you have to pay severance. There's all sorts of other financial issues that come into play that will cost you money. So this is sort of a way to have some savings and hopefully get rid of some employees. It's really unfortunate. It does not reflect well on the companies, and it really is very harmful to employee morale.
So one of the things that typically happens during business cycles is this process that economists refer to as creative destruction. So as we figure out what the next step is, when you see demand slowing down, what's the new product you're going to release? You want to create, but then in order to create, you need to cut costs. And that's part of the destruction. So really, businesses are trying to optimize for the future, and that results in these things that we call reorganizations that are often being referred to as quiet cutting.
Quiet cutting done right is a great way for employers to have that employee engagement, employee satisfaction. But if the quiet cutting is done the wrong way, it impacts the mental health, it impacts the employee engagement, it impacts the reputations for employers as well. So they really have to think it through if the quiet cutting is the right approach to go by right now, or maybe layoff it is, because they really have to think it of if it's the right approach.
So again, guys, like I said, I was actually researching just through YouTube and some other digital online or publications. I was actually looking at how AI is going to affect many jobs in the near future. In fact, many say that there's going to be a bloodbath of unemployment when it comes to a lot of these front end, mid level jobs that involves even tech, right? It's, a lot of it is going to be tech. And they're saying that your typical job that anybody could go find, not anybody, but most people could flush out somewhere is a call center agent, or at least first level, entry level customer service, whether you're taking calls online, you're taking them on the phone somewhere, or you're in the office. But what they're saying is we live in a agentic space. We're in the agentic era now. We're no longer in this place where, you know, you're sitting at home and someone calls. Let's say I'm sitting at home, I'm a call center rep, or I'm a call center agent for a company like Office Depot. I'll just pick on them, or Staples, in case Office Depot is not around anymore. And what I work on is refunds, or what I work on is returns. So when somebody places a call, they might route that call to me, and I handle the process to getting it refunded, the reasons why, or some low-level, front-end, first-level stuff. What they're saying now is with AI, it's agentic AI. Agentic, like agent with an IC at the end, agentic. And the difference here is now you have a system or an augmentation to improve upon the level of service that a regular agent, a human being, could give. Because instead of saying, okay, I see right here your account, you purchased that last Wednesday at 2:00. Yeah, you're still under warranty. The agentic AI, it can actually go in and look further into the system than I can, than I'm authorized to, sitting at my house or sitting at Starbucks or even sitting in the office. The agentic AI, that agent will be able to go into different systems as if they're really troubleshooting and putting together a response based on other areas that agent that was hired at the front level, they cannot even see. That right now they would be required to email somebody or tell you, look, I'm gonna put a ticket in. Like you're calling them for help and they have to put a ticket in for the next level. A lot of that stuff will be eliminated because technically speaking, one way of doing that is you allow the agent, the AI agent, to get access, whether it's through a series of APIs or other web services and connections, to parts of the system that the agent wouldn't have access to. That it's as simple as that. I mean, if you think about it from a business side, if it was your business, why not? It can do more to actually problem solve and run analytics and get to the guts or the meat or the essence of the issue, potentially, then you could hire a person and give them access to all of that. This is just crazy. That's why they say now in the year 2024 or the year 2023 or the year 2025, it's the agentic space. It's the agentic AI, because it's actually going to do some work. And it doesn't need to just be on there with the person for 1 or 2 minutes. It can go off for 15, 20 minutes or half an hour and just do what it needs to do to figure out what the issue is and come back with something, of course, initially for the human being to feed back to the customer or the client or the constituent. But ultimately, you're not going to need the customer, the client, or the constituent, because you're going to have an algorithm. You're going to have an agent with a pleasant voice, whether it be 2 a.m. or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, showing some sense of empathy, and they're going to go and do it. So a lot of these jobs, you won't need them. I mean, they're just going to be replaced. Now, of course, the functioning or the working term now is augmentation, right? Because augmentation is different than replacement. When we augment something, we're improving it. We're making whatever's being done better. We're coupling it together, and we're saying, together we're going to get to it, and we're going to improve this process. We're going to improve our response. We're going to improve the build. We're going to make it better. But soon, like real soon, they say, what appears to be augmentation in a lot of cases will turn out to be a replacement. That's just what it is. In fact, they was warning the other day, and this was coming out on different news agencies, whether it be MSNBC, whether it be Fox News, whether it be Bloomberg, they was talking about this.
A new piece that just posted on Axios.com moments ago, taking a critical look at the future of artificial intelligence. It's a pretty incredible piece. It's entitled Behind the Curtain, a white-collar bloodbath. That could be the result of AI.
Well, yeah, and Jim, people that run AI companies don't want to talk about it. They want to pretend it's not going to happen. Silicon Valley wants to pretend it's not going to happen. Wall Street doesn't really want to talk about it. But the fact is, as you report, just like the technological revolution, the IT revolution gutted blue-collar workers throughout the 90s and beyond, you're now talking about a bloodbath for white-collar workers because of AI. And from what you've seen and what you're reporting on, it is going to be a bloodbath for workers.
I mean, that is certainly the warning of Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic. And just for your viewers, Anthropic is one of the top creators of this AI, these large language models in the world. So he has better visibility than probably all but 2 or 3 people in the world into the power of this technology. He'd been telling us in private for a while that this bloodbath could be coming, but that lawmakers don't want to talk about it. The federal government doesn't want to talk about it. AI companies don't want to spook people. We finally convinced him to go on the record. And his point is, like, listen, just play with this technology, not just casually. Like, once you really dive into it, you realize it can do the work already of researchers, of analysts, of a whole host of entry-level white-collar jobs. And he put it in the starkest of terms. He said, like, based on their early analysis, over a 5-year period, it could wipe out half of white-collar entry-level jobs. Unemployment could spike to 10 to 20% in the next 5 years. And this is a guy who's building the technology, who's boasting about the power of it. And when we pushed him on, then if you're building it, like, how do you morally kind of think about it in your own mind? And he said, I have an obligation to build the technology. I also have an obligation to get the federal government, to get lawmakers, to get other AI companies to figure out how do we prepare the American worker and how do we protect the American worker. And so, as someone who runs a company, I run Axios as a CEO, I spend an inordinate amount of time studying AI and how it's going to play out just in my space of media. And I can guarantee you in the next 5 years, it's going to radically transform the makeup of our company. Well, every single company in the world is doing this. Every CEO is sitting there saying, should I fill this role? Should I open this role? Will a machine do this better than man in the next couple of years? When you see data out about the difficulty of college grads finding new jobs, this is one of the early telltale signs that this could be coming. And so I think the column is very much worth a read. I wish lawmakers spent more time thinking about this rather than some of the small ball things that they debate day to day.
It's been fascinating to see many of the people who are developing AI technology, Jim, offering warnings about what's coming because of it. And in your interview, he effectively says, you cannot stop this train. It's coming down the tracks. This is happening. I think the way he puts it in your interview, though, is you can steer it a little bit. What does that look like? What does steering it look like?
And I'll just jump in here before I continue with that piece. It's not a helpless situation, okay? It's not a situation where it's nothing that can be done, not in this moment, not in real time. It's not. It's just that if you're in denial, like, you don't want to be in denial. I talk to guys over 50, over 55, over 60, but they're still working. They are still working. They're doing things. Some of them are in the office. They're working with systems and they're doing this other stuff. And yet some of them express the sentiments. And you talk about it about AI. You talk about the change in technology, the different LLMs, large language models, and all of the stuff that's out here now. And they say, well, I don't even get into that stuff. This is like the response. And I say, what do you mean you don't get into it? And he says, I don't mess around with it. And then I say, well, what is it that you do? And when they tell me what they do, they're already interacting with AI. They're already interacting with those types of systems that are being born out of, that are derivatives of this AI world, right? This space that we're in, whether, like I said, whether it be a reflexive, whether it be predictive, whatever it is, you know. And I was asking one guy, we was talking about databases, and I was like, you know, are you up on, or will you be learning about vector databases? You know, because he's familiar with databases and he kind of does stuff in it. And he looked at me and said, what's a vector database? And so I said, well, a vector database is typically the ones that the artificial intelligence, the large language models use. They're using vector databases. Now, if you know anything, it's not a lot to know. I'm just saying if you know anything. Traditionally, a database is what you call transactional, and well, not the database itself, it's relational, okay? So you have a series of tables, if you think about spreadsheets, holding particular data with columns and rows, holding the data, but in a database like a Microsoft SQL database or something like a MySQL database, you have these tables and you have these rows and columns of information, and you can parse through it and do whatever you need to do as if you had a spreadsheet. But at least with the database, most of the time, it's structured and unstructured, but for the most part, you want structured data in there, right? Now, with artificial intelligence, with the large language models, that database doesn't go as far. It doesn't do as much, okay? The way it's set up, that won't work. That just relational part won't get it. Okay, because it's not looking at what's in there in the same way. So they have vector databases, and basically what's in those fields are mathematical representations. And what's coming out is based on scoring systems. Of course, this is what? Deep learning, machine learning, neural networks, the AI, all of that. I'm just making it up. It's just word salad at this point. But when we was talking about that, he had no clue. So I just asked him, will you be attempting to learn? Will you be putting yourself in front of, you know, getting some training on vector databases so that if your company decided to bring in their own LLM, their large language model, specific to their domain, to what you guys do, it's on and popping for you. It's a transition. You done upskilled or reskilled or whatever they call that when you know something and you need to learn a little bit more. You did that, right? And he just was like, man, I'm not really interested. And that's cool, because he's not. That's fine. But for people who are currently a call center agent, for people who are currently really good at Excel and they use Microsoft Word or they use the other Office products that they pride themselves off, because why? Because they've been using it for years and they kind of know what they're doing, right? If you're concerned, I think some of your concern can be mitigated if you become more aware of maybe that next step to make yourself more valuable, more of an asset, more marketable. Example, if you take something as simple as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Access, or Excel or something like that, and you got this one guy at the company, he's been using it for 10 years. And then you got this other guy at the company, or both of them potentially being interviewed or whatever, he's only been using it for 3 years, everything else being the same. Gender, height, color, looks, whatever. You would think that that company would want the guy with the 10 years experience versus the guy with the 3 years experience, everything else being equal. Not necessarily so, not now. You know why? If I was interviewing that guy and the guy with the 10 years experience, I would be impressed with that and I would acknowledge that. But when the guy with the 3 years experience sits in front of me and he says to me, well, I only have 3 years experience in Excel or Word, but the great thing is, that's what I meant to say. The great thing is I use Microsoft Copilot when I'm using Excel. And I use Microsoft Copilot when I use Microsoft Word. And man, that tool that comes with it, I learned something right on the spot, or it helps me to get to what I really need to know. And it'll give me examples of the formatting. I can prompt it. It's like I can just put text in there and it'll give me 3 different examples based on my use case. Whereas though before you had to find somebody on the floor in the department or send it as if it was an IT problem. When it wasn't an IT problem, you just don't know how to use Excel that well. They're going to want that person. The reason why they're going to probably choose that person is because with the advent of artificial intelligence, with the advent of all of these LLMs, machine learnings, and robots essentially, and all of this virtualized stuff, they don't need the brightest person in the room. Sometimes, most of the times, they're going to be looking for the most aware person. Meaning what? You don't have the 10 years experience this other guy does. But because you are aware that Microsoft has an AI for those individual apps called Copilot, that's why we want you. Whereas though the other guy, he's stuck on priding himself from using it for 10 years. But he has no awareness. Therefore, he has no excitement. Therefore, he has no appreciation for the new current tools. See, we need somebody that can get to the tools and the resource and has an appreciation and might be excited to learn how to use them, because they will catch up with the person with the 10 years experience easily, because you just won't need that anymore in that sense. Now, I don't mean the culture of the company. I don't mean I said everything else being equal. That's what I'm getting at. But anyway, in your environment, or you're not in the environment, let's say you're somebody who's never coded, but you're thinking about doing something to learn how to code. Learning how to code now is probably as easy as it's ever been. If you're thinking learning how to code now is absolutely too difficult now, why, Todd? Because of AI and OpenChatGPT and Grok and Einstein and Firefly and Claude and Opus and on and on and on and on. You're absolutely wrong. You are not correct. You are absolutely wrong. It's because of the transparency. It's because of so much of it being open source. Even when it comes to the large language models and the different designs and how can we say this? The topologies of some of these chats and all of this stuff, they're making the weights available. They're making parts of it available that you can develop, you can learn. How to do it has probably never been so available to the people who would never have a chance to learn how to do it because of your education. Maybe you didn't go to the school, you didn't go to college, you didn't go to anything. You don't have to now. You don't have to now. You just don't. And ultimately, and that's the advantage of technology, that is one of the advantages of the tech field, people will hire you when they realize you can do the work. You will get opportunities if you can do it. You just will. You will get opportunities if you can be trained. But if you go in there, and I'm just talking about the over 50s, if you go in there, look, I don't know anything about that AI, that artificial stuff. I stay away from that, but I've been doing this for 20 years. If you go in there sounding like the last slave, like there's no more slaves around but you with that thinking, what you're essentially doing is telling those people, don't hire me because I'm an artifact. I don't want to know anything different. Don't expose me to anything different. I don't realize anything different. Okay. Don't do that if you want to be in the space, because it's coming. You have to, I'll give you an example. You could damn near make a position in your company or go to one. If you become aware of the tools that are available, they're going to sense that you are aware. They probably will invest in you and get you trained, because half the shit is free to be trained on anyway. You're going to be the person that take the people with the experience that may not know about AI and make them aware, make them literate, whatever. I'm making it up because there's so much low-hanging fruit on there in terms of opportunity if you still want to play in some sort of space. But if you just, if not, that's fine. There's plenty of room. You don't have to. And of course, when they're talking about jobs, they're basically saying that blue-collar jobs are not as threatened because they require the human being. They require the hands of the human, the voice of the human, the look of the human, and the body of the human. So they're not, a plumber is a plumber. The robot can't go in there and do that part because there's too many different ways to get to the toilet, and there's too many different types of houses, and there's too many different bugs, and it's whatever. But let me be quiet for a second.
In his mind, I think it's sounding the alarm. It's like, listen, we got to have a national debate that this isn't 10 years from now. It could be 6 months from now. It could be 12 months from now. Then there has to be a debate about, okay, how do you make sure that workers are prepared to use artificial intelligence to augment their work, not displace their work? That's what we've been doing at Axios. We give everybody access to the technology. We have a deal with OpenAI. We make sure that every single unit, no matter what your job is already playing with this to figure out how are you going to augment your work so you don't.
Listen to what he's saying. This guy right here is the CEO of Axios, AXIOS. Listen to what he's saying. He's saying, listen to those terms. I mentioned them a few minutes ago. Augment, not displace or replace. He's being nice with displace, replace your ass. That's the thing. And like he says, we're making the technology available to everybody in the company, meaning they're basically saying, look, it's a train coming down the street. It's coming through this building. It's coming through our corporate structure. We can't stop it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make it available to you. We're going to put a situation where you can learn some stuff. If you have the initiative and the interest, you can do it. They probably have things set up where they probably make the time available for them, even under their work days. Use this time and learn these tools. Become familiar with it. Like he said, we got to figure out a way that our current employees, our current staff can use AI and use those tools and resources to augment their roles, augment, improve upon, instead of displace them. That's really important. Like, just let me move this back 30 seconds just to hear it again.
About, okay, how do you make sure that workers are prepared to use artificial intelligence to augment their work, not displace their work? That's what we've been doing at Axios. We give everybody access to the technology. We have a deal with OpenAI. We make sure that every single unit, no matter what your job is already playing with this to figure out how are you going to augment your work so you don't get displaced by it. Hell, I told my own staff you're committing career suicide if you're not spending 10% of your day experimenting with the staff. You're committing career suicide if you're not spending 10%. You don't get displaced by it. Hell, I told my own staff you're committing career suicide.
It's not a hiccup. I keep playing that part back. That's what I was saying to the guys I be talking to. You mean you working in the company and you have a role in IT. You're doing some sort of technology support at whatever company or business they do. And you're sitting here telling me you're not concerned about it. You're telling me you don't even bother. You don't even know what the hell I'm talking about or why I'm talking about it. That's what you're sitting there and telling me. This guy is the CEO. Do you know how easy it is for the CEO of a company that base itself off of technology, because this is Axios, right? Everything they do is tech-driven. Digital publications, technicians, engineers, everything that they do, even their writers, even their editors, whatever it is that they do. This is the CEO saying you're committing job or career suicide to stick your head in the ground like a goddamn, what's the animal that does that? That look like it can fly, but it can't? Whatever that is. It's crazy. He's saying that. Listen to this. It's one thing for people to have this mindset. Well, I would do it, but my job won't let me do it on their hours. I was talking about your career. I was talking about your path, your trajectory. I was talking about tomorrow when they get rid of you. So you're saying for your own well-being, for your own development, you wouldn't take advantage or you wouldn't inquire about getting some AI literacy, improving upon that, so that you could, if part of your role is marketing, if part of your role is social media manager, you're not going to go to your employer or your supervisor or even in your own business. You're not going to start to peruse and look around and talk to people and go to different podcasts and watch and ignore crazy people like me so you can get a better idea that is so much right there available to you. It's not as esoteric as people make it seem. I'm not saying, it's not this way. You don't have to learn how to code. You don't have to be the computer science major. No, if you're the person that does the flyer and you just love Adobe and you're the person that does your post to the websites and you just love CapCut and you're that person. So you do the social media, you do the marketing, you do the desktop whatever it is your role is. Well, if you're using Adobe products, you just got to understand what Firefly is. That's all. Firefly is the AI engine, is the artificial intelligence that's powering behind Adobe. That's why now, if you think about it, remember years ago, you had to find that special person with a digital pen or had steady hands like a goddamn surgeon to do the cut and mask with the pen thing when you go into Adobe Photoshop, so you could just get exact cuts of an image and help you mask it and all that. Now, you can just open up a free edition of expressadobe.com or something because you've registered with an email address and click on remove background to any image and it's gone. You could just open up Adobe, Photoshop, or Lightroom or any of that stuff and grab an image and just click on it and it's gone. Why? Because the AI, the Firefly for Adobe, takes care of that. So you can do what? So you can do your job as the graphics person to do the flyer, to get the message, to do the post, instead of you becoming Adobe cut out with the pen feature technologist and waste hours on that and become the number one masking person and waste hours with that. And the number two, create a new layer in order to do the first three things you did, and the 6 hours gone. That's augmentation. That's you using that tool, finding out, do they have anything that's going to augment what you already do, and you being excited and finding some value in that. So now that's what you're doing for your business or your employer or your organization or whatever that is. That's what we're talking about. Not, I can't take it. You don't have to take it. You have to become aware. You have to get excited. You have to find something that it helps you do, improving the time, improving the quality, where you could say, damn, yeah, I'm with this. That's all it is. So I'm going to really shut up for about 5 minutes. I just thought it was dope to hear the CEO say that he told his staff, you're committing career suicide because you ain't got to keep working here if you don't make yourself aware or spend 10% of your time working here, learning about the AI tools.
We have a deal with OpenAI. We make sure that every single unit, no matter what your job is already playing with this to figure out how are you going to augment your work so you don't get displaced by it. Hell, I told my own staff, you're committing career suicide if you're not spending 10% of your day experimenting with the technology. And I don't think most people are. I think people are like, whoa, this is too science fiction, or, it's a really neat search engine. They're not actually looking at the capabilities. They don't have the time. They have real lives. But I think Dario's point was they might not wake up until it's way too late. And if lawmakers are way too late to it, you could have real issues. You could have unemployment, as he said, 10 to 20% if he's right, which would then lead to obvious political unrest. We have Steve Bannon on the record in there saying he thinks the exact same thing is going to play out. He said Trump's not talking about it, but he thinks this will be maybe the biggest topic of the 2028 presidential election.
I mean, you have Steve Bannon on the right. You have other people on the left very concerned about this. And Jim, you underlined a point that I've actually told my kids, which is if you're going into an interview, if you're going into anything where you are going to be talking and you want to understand a topic, it's just foolish not to go onto a search engine app, an AI search engine app, and dig in deep to try to understand a company that you're talking to or an issue that you're talking about better. It is Elizabeth, it is the future. The future is now. And a lot of the spaces that we work in 10 years from now are going to look completely different because of AI. And white collar workers across the country, as Jim said, are going to be deeply impacted.
Well, so Jim, tell me how exactly will this affect our business? So will we still have copy editors, reporters, bosses? What do you say?
For journalism, I don't think that the machines are going to do the journalism per se. But if you play with it at all, you realize it's going to be a really good copy editor. It's going to be a really good marketer. It's going to be really good at doing research. It's going to be really good at doing marketing. It's going to be really good at taking any piece and maybe creating 8 different variations to send it out to all the other platforms. And that's what I would encourage people to do is play with it, assuming that the hallucinations and the errors go away. Because there are times where it is truly magical. And if that were to happen with a human level efficacy, anybody running a company, I'm telling you, as someone who runs a company, they're always going to choose automation because they're going to believe that over time it's going to make their company more profitable and it's going to create more jobs. And that might be true, and that often is true with technology, that in the long arc, it creates more jobs. What's different here is this is a technology that could hit hard in the next 6 to 18 months, and it's going to hit every single role potentially simultaneously. And something that fast with that kind of breadth could have a much bigger effect than almost any of the topics that they're debating on Capitol Hill. And when you talk to members of Congress, it's alarming how little they know about this topic and how little and how infrequently they talk to their constituents about it. You're doing a disservice to the country if you're not starting to think through what does the world look like in 18 months to 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you have 40 or 50 people in your company with AI. Most white-collar companies, you could hire 4 or 5 people that know the right prompts to ask the right prompts of AI, and it would cover so much of that work. And you.
All right, here's a question. Could the rise of artificial intelligence lead to job losses for everyday Americans trying to make ends meet? Our next guest, who is the CEO of one of the most powerful AI companies in the world, says we are heading for a catastrophic employment crisis that no one is talking about. Well, we are going to talk about it with Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic. He joins me now. Dario.
Just real quick, and I'm going to shut up again, right? All of these tools, most of them, 90% of them, you could just register with your email or something like that and just use the free version, okay? Now, I use OpenAI, and when I say OpenAI or ChatGPT, I know now that's more of a generic or general term. to because it's almost commoditized to represent some form of ChatGPT, because there's several versions of ChatGPT systems out there, right? But the one that I use, or I pay the pro version, is $20 a month or something, is OpenAI's ChatGPT. I only do that because I use it. That's why I do that. I wouldn't pay for any of these services unless your use case drives you to do so because of your business, because of your company, because of where you work or whatever like that. And then you can get them to pay for it. But this idea that you don't know about it because you don't have access, that is not democratized, making it available, is not true. You're lying. You're not only lying to me when you say it to me, you're lying it to anybody else you tell it to. Because that thing's over with. That thing's over with. To get you to pay for something first and you're stuck with it at least for a month, and oh, you didn't like it, well, that's on you. They don't have to do that. Think about it. The reason why they don't have to sell it like that, these are not people. They can make as many of these robots and agents and AIs and libraries as they want. They just paying the compute power on the back end, but it's going to settle out. It just is. Become familiar. Understand that if you got a phone and you know how to text people, oh, let me ask Talk this real quick. Well, when you go to Google, we put the question in. When we're using spreadsheets, we might call all of that a query because we're asking a digital question. Just learn to understand the difference, or the term as it's used as prompting when you're using any of these chat GPTs. It's prompting. And you say, what's the difference between prompting and querying? There is a slight difference. Even though some people will say you're doing the same thing, you're asking a question through a digital device that somewhere in the back end, it hits a data store or a collection of data, and it, surface backs or responds with some information served up to you in a more intelligible way. Instead of it being called data, they send it back by way of something that we can identify as information, right? Well, prompting is different because you can kind of prompt it up. In other words, you can add context. Instead of me just saying, hey, I want to know how to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius, and I prompt that, and it comes back. Now I can say, I'm a third grade teacher. I have 10 years experience. I teach in private schools. I want to teach the kids how to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. It's going to go in, and it's going to index, and it's going to try to contextualize, and it's going to give me a different response. It just is. And it's not going to be doing it based on who paid to have a response up front like you do when you do a regular search on a search engine. You might get these paid ads or these paid listings, and then what you're really looking for is on the third or fourth page with no ad. I mean, I'm just making that up as a quick example. It might be the worst example, but I'm just saying your awareness to what you do and how it can be augmented, it's going to be valuable to not only you moving forward, but it's going to be valuable to where you currently are. I'll leave that there and actually shut up. Now this guy, Anthropic, he's the co-founder, CEO, whatever, Anthropic. They have Claude out now. They have, I'm thinking Opus is coming. Not Opus Clip. I understand we use Opus Clip. That's something different, but check out what he says about these jobs.
Of Anthropic. He joins me now. Dario, thank you so much for joining us. You have a critical message for us this morning. So how many job losses are we talking about here, and who is at risk?
So just to back up a bit, I've been working on AI for 10 years, and probably the thing I've noticed most about it is how fast it's making progress. 2 years ago, it was at the level of a smart high school student. Now it's probably at the level of a smart college student and reaching beyond that. And on one hand, I think there's a number of very positive things that are going to happen. I used to be a biologist. I think AI has exactly the kind of skills that are needed to cure important diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, to provide cheaper energy, many positive things. But exactly those same kind of skills, things like summarizing a document, brainstorming, putting together a financial report, makes me worry a lot that entry-level jobs in areas like finance, consulting, tech, many other areas like that, entry-level white-collar work, I worry that those things are going to be first augmented, but before long replaced by AI systems, and that we may indeed. It's hard to predict the future, but we may indeed have a serious employment crisis on our hands as the pipeline for these early stage white collar work starts to contract and dry up.
What's the timeline here?
Yes, so it's very hard to predict these things given how fast AI is making progress. But I would not be surprised if somewhere between 1 and 5 years we started to see big effects here. I've heard a number of people talk about this in private. AI CEOs talk about this in private. CEOs of other companies talk about this in private. And I really felt that the message that this is happening hasn't been getting out to ordinary people, hasn't been getting out to our legislators, our Congress people either. And so I felt I needed to speak up on the record. I do think that this is something we can prevent this. But we need to act now. I don't think we can stop the AI bus. There are 6 or 7 companies just in the U.S. working in this area. I just run one of them. Even if our company stopped doing what it was doing today, all the other companies would continue. Even if all 6 companies started, then China would beat us. I think that's a big and important threat. So we can't stop the bus, but I do think we may have an opportunity to steer it. And I think we need to get Congress people, legislators, the public to think about this now. One of the first steps we're taking is just measuring the effects. Anthropic has put out something that we call our economic index. And using the economic index, we try and track the rate at which these things are happening. At some point, we have to go beyond measuring this to actually taking action, to trying to build our AI systems in a way that augments rather than replaces. But that won't be a long-term solution either. We need to think about what the government is going to do. And there's a wide range of actions that the government could take. And it's not my place to decide which of those are correct. But I think the first step is people need to think about this and start taking it very seriously.
Yeah, and you're talking about AI possibly wiping out all entry-level white-collar jobs and spiking unemployment to 10 to 20%. So dive into the mitigation of this a little bit more. How could we mitigate the worst possible scenario here?
Yeah, so it's hard to know the exact numbers. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. But what I will say is I think what AI can do, there have been these technological changes in the past, but I think what's different about AI is it's broader, it's deeper, and it's moving faster than previous such technologies. And so in terms of mitigations, I think one is just educating people in order to use AI. There will always be people who are using AI, and helping our workers to adapt faster, I think is an important move. A second move is that we may want government to kind of find a way to level the economic playing field. And this may be a controversial proposal, but something like taxing AI companies like us, we may need to get
and that's
to things
a very
that are
interesting
extreme.
message coming from you, who runs an AI company. But you're doing a public service announcement for all of us in terms of this future concern. Dario, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our
A blunt new warning for American workers. Artificial intelligence is about to wipe out millions of jobs. One expert says a bloodbath is looming. So we asked, what, if anything, can workers do now to protect their careers? This morning, a major tech CEO is sounding the alarm about the technology he's spearheading. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, the head of the company behind AI model Claude 4, has a blunt warning, telling the website Axios half of all entry-level, white-collar jobs could be wiped out by artificial intelligence within 5 years, potentially driving the unemployment rate up to 20%. He says industries most at risk include law, marketing, tech, and finance.
These new generative AI technologies pose a real risk to early career knowledge jobs.
In recent months, AI has shown stunning capabilities, from generating hyper-realistic fake videos to diagnosing rare diseases through data analysis. The state Supreme Court in Arizona is even using AI-powered avatars to act as reporters and summarize court rulings.
My AI colleague Daniel and I will be bringing you regular updates.
AI's rapid rise could bring real benefits, but also real disruption. The people most likely to be hit first, young, college-educated workers in their first jobs, before they've built experience or seniority.
Who don't yet have the work experience to be a sort of a manager of a team of AI agents.
Some major companies already downsizing. Walmart cutting 1,500 corporate jobs, part of a technology-led restructuring. Microsoft laying off 6,000, saying it's aligning for the AI era. So how can you protect your career? Experts say double down on what AI struggles with, making human connections and doing things in person.
If you can do your job locked in a closet with a computer, those are the things that are more worrying for AI. Things that have to be in person and really with people tend to be safer.
And learn to work with AI, not against it.
It's really important that you've mastered your craft, your area of expertise, augmented by this technology.
Anthropic's CEO is pushing lawmakers to get up to speed on AI and urgently look at